Hi, this is Movie Thoughts. My name is John Hastings. This is the 31st episode, and it's coming to you after a bit of a hiatus, over a month since my last episode. The purpose of the show, the podcast, the video, is to kind of share my random observations about movies. It's not really very professionally done in any way. It's sort of sloppy. I always hope it's kind of interesting. Part of the reason I haven't been recording more is that one, I've been busy with other things and spending time doing other things. I haven't been watching as many movies either, and I feel partly like I feel more when I'm more in a mode where I'm watching a lot of movies, I'm kind of more apt to want to talk about them. And when I'm, for whatever reason, not watching movies, can be hard to work up the enthusiasm to do this. But I was actually looking through my Facebook, and a memory came up, kind of a shared memory type thing, of something I had written 6 years ago, right after the death of Robin Williams, who was an actor whose work I really loved. Um, and it reminded me that I had also planned to do an episode about Robin Williams, and that was something I'd planned to do back in December even. So, at the end of last year, I was hoping to do an episode on Robin Williams, and that initial idea for a Robin Williams episode came from reading the biography called Robin by David Itzkoff, and wanting to talk about the biography and then talk about this idea of some, this kind of idea of there are movies in Robin Williams' career that I value quite a bit that tend to be sort of underrated, and I have a couple ideas of why that is. And I was sort of, and when I was reading the biography by David Itzkoff, which I think is a pretty good show business actor movie star biography. I don't think I have too many criticisms of it in terms of its overall take on things. I do did notice that it kind of goes along with the conventional wisdom on some of these maybe less highly thought of Robin Williams performances. So I wanted to kind of talk about those movies and some of the reasons for why I think maybe they aren't as highly regarded. So let me start, I guess, by saying, let me just actually look this up. I want to get my own. I want to quote myself properly here. But when, and I'll talk a little bit more about the my kind of my post on Facebook that reminded me of all this. So um, when Robin Williams died, I wanted to point out something. Something about his filmography that I thought was worth noting, or his work that was worth noting. So I wrote that. Well, I don't think Mrs. Doubtfire is a great movie. I do think that his performance in it is a great work of art, and one of the greatest to try to deal with the theme of this fine line between parental love and madness. And I thought that the actor's gift there for comic convention is really tied to that character's pathological, or almost pathological, desperation. And Robin Williams doesn't distance us from that. It makes it sort of a weird movie to watch, because the movie's trying to be like a sitcom, but there's such desperate energy from Robin Williams that it doesn't really let us experience it completely as a sitcom, no matter how much the movie tries. There's this kind of rawness to the emotions that are not safe and sentimental, even if that's where the movie wants to go. And it reminds me, in that sense, of closer to being a performance, the type of performance given by someone like Jerry Lewis, as opposed to say Jim Carrey or Will Ferrell. With Will Ferrell or Jim Carrey, those guys are funny partly because they're fearless in terms of not worrying about embarrassing themselves. Like Will Ferrell especially is perfectly happy to be the butt of all sorts of jokes, and that's part of his persona and part of this charm. With someone like Robin Williams, or at least in that performance especially, and then someone like Jerry Lewis, what's powerful about them is they aren't afraid to embarrass us with that intensity of their feeling. I think that's partly what makes those guys such great performers. Anyways, I had written that back, after Robin Williams died, and I bring up this little anecdote to say that I've only ever once been, as far as I know, the I should say, I may have been blocked on social media by people a lot. I don't know really. The only time that someone has blocked me and kind of let me know, hey, I'm about to block you, was based on my admittedly somewhat maybe overly passionate defense of Robin Williams in the days after his death. So I was sort of had a maybe more reason to be a little bit more worked up about it than otherwise. Um, but it kind of spoke to this idea, or that kind of I bring that up because I feel that Robin Williams as a performer, or if you look at his whole career, it's sort of this mixed bag in a lot of ways, where there are a lot of movies that I think people would not think are great movies, and then even some of his best work is not necessarily in great movies, like Mrs. Doubtfire. Um, I think it's a great performance, and I think it's unfortunate that it's sort of trapped in a movie that doesn't quite know what to do with that performance. David Itzcock's biography definitely gives a sense of a guy who is maybe more talented than he knows exactly what to do with, and you could say, well, maybe it's the fault of Hollywood not knowing what to do with him, or the industry not really figuring him out, and I think that's part of it. But I also think it's partly career choices he seemed to make that weren't necessarily uh, as great in the long run in terms of kind of leaving behind this kind of movies we can really enjoy as masterpieces. Anyway, what I really want to talk about though are again, along those lines. There's these a couple of movies from early in his career where he had been a big star on TV and was trying to make the transition to being a movie star, and it wasn't quite working out in terms of connecting with audiences. And in interviews at the time, and shortly afterwards, he's always sort of downplayed these movies and looked at them as mistakes. Robin Williams did. He saw these movies as mistakes, as misfires, as things that didn't work. And it's completely understandable from my point of view to be an actor who's in a movie that flops and then to say, well, obviously if it was any good, it wouldn't have flopped. So it must be, we it was a misfire. It didn't work, for whatever reason. And they can kind of come up with different reasons why. I think that, however, to a certain extent, a someone coming after the fact, like a biographer, for example, or certainly critics, we don't necessarily need to take that the actor, the performers, or the creative person's word on like what their take on these movies are. And I think that to kind of move more generally, I think that's often something we do, or you know, the conventional wisdom is it's very easy to kind of have the conventional wisdom be built around this idea that, oh, Robin Williams said that this movie was a misfire, so it must be a misfire, and then movies that may actually have something worthwhile about them or be interesting in other ways, uh, kind of get lost or get buried. Whereas maybe more popular, more immediately successful movies are not subject to the same thing, and you end up with the some of the better known movies in coming down in Robin Williams' career being not as good as some of these lesser ones, and partly I think because of his those statements he had made, minimizing them, and maybe some specific examples will be more helpful. The movies I'm thinking of are again these movies made before he became a big star, had that big kind of breakout, big movie star breakout with things like Dead Poet Society and Good Morning Vietnam. But um, so two in particular, I think are pretty one is a pretty good movie with a great Robin Williams performance, and the other one I think is a genuinely great movie with a bunch of different great things about it. So the pretty good movie with a great Robin Williams performance I think is The Survivors, and that's directed by Michael Ritchie, and it has Walter Matthau and Robin Williams in it as two guys who are, they're sort of victimized by, they don't have much in common. They're victimized by this petty criminal, and they end up turning from that to becoming kind of survival nuts. And it's pretty funny. Robin Williams is, especially kind of, his character is super neurotic and kind of goes overboard in his the way he kind of gets into this survivalist mindset. He's also kind of very ineffective, so it is a very Jerry Lewis type situation. It really shows, the performance really shows him at, working at such a high level of kind of performance and inventiveness, and it's really where he really manages to build in that kind of, that constant, like he's, talking to himself, like self monologuing, kind of under the surface of this character, kind of going on it all the time. I mean, but not doing it as an act. It doesn't come across as someone doing a stand-up act, but it's really built into the way this character works, and it's kind of genius. The movie has a really great feel. It's part of, I think, a group of movies that I would consider the late 70s, early 80s revival of the Hollywood anarchic comedy. And a lot of that was pushed by, a lot of that revival seemed to come out of like SNL and the National Lampoon folks. But The Survivors is not quite coming from that school, but has a lot of the same qualities as something like Stripes or Meatballs. Uh, and it didn't do well, and I don't think Robin Williams particularly liked working on it, and so he does kind of doesn't have anything nice to say about it, and the it's followed. It wasn't a hit, and people in general haven't had nice things to say about it. But I think it's a pretty good movie, and it's worth looking at. Certainly for the performance, but also it's pretty funny. Another movie I think is really quite good, that is unfortunate that it has a bad rep, is from the same time period, The Best of Times, which has just a beautiful screenplay by Ron Shelton, and is really nicely directed by Roger Spottiswoode. And The Best of Times also has Kurt Russell in it. It's a sports movie, and it's one of my favorite sports movies. In the American cinema, and it's about similarly, it has a great performance for, or a great character for Robin Williams as this kind of guy who is trying to right the wrongs of the past through a really crazy cockamamie scheme. And it has similar, like I was talking about with Mrs. Doubtfire, there's a similar approach where the desperation of Robin's character is presented in a very funny way, but it's also very close to this real desperation that gives the movie kind of a bite and an edge that it might not otherwise have. I think Pauline Kael compared it to, she liked it a lot and compared it to Preston Sturges, and I think it is a worthy successor to a movie like Hail the Conquering Hero. So The Best of Times I really like, and again, Robin Williams didn't have anything nice to say about the movie, and the David Itzkoff's biography kind of goes along with that, and kind of downplaying it, or not really pointing out that it has anything good going for it. But apart from Robin Williams, Kurt Russell's great in it, and the other performances are all also really good. The has two really there's two couples, the two main couples in it. The relationships are really nicely written and drawn in the movie, and it's I think a highlight of that period of American cinema for that type of comedy. Anyway, so those would be two movies that I think kind of get undervalued or underknown, and partly because of this story that that Robin himself, um, kept persisting that these weren't these flopped. Therefore they aren't any good. So that's kind of really what I wanted to talk about in terms of these Robin Williams movies that I think are pretty good, but maybe not as well known as they could be. And I think again that that is a general thing. I think there's a tendency to kind of go along with, if a production, if we know from behind the scenes that a production was a mess and there was like a lot of tension, it's a tendency to then kind of see bad things in the movie and then we can explain it. Well, of course there's bad things in the movie. Didn't you read about the production? It was a huge mess. And actually, I think that sometimes, yeah, a huge mess of a production, it makes sense. It leads to a bad movie. Sometimes a perfectly pleasant production that everything goes well leads to bad movies, and we don't turn that into a story. Sometimes conflict on the set leads to good movies, and sometimes it doesn't. Um, I think that the main thing is, again, kind of the points that come back here again and again, is that it's dangerous to, or we miss out if we pay too much attention to like the narrative that builds up around a movie. And it's especially troubling, or a place of maybe more problems or more trouble if we are listening too closely to what the artists and creators involved think about it, because their perspective on things isn't going to be that of an audience. It's like, who cares? Why should we care if audiences in like the early 1980s didn't want to pay to see the best of times? you know that what is who cares? That, I mean, why do I care about that? That has nothing to do with the quality. It's movie as a quality, it's interest, it's human interest. It has nothing to do with Robin Williams' performance. It has nothing to do with anything really. And you can look at movies from Robin Williams' career that did hit with audiences and that made a ton of money, that now we would look at and say, like, who cares that, you know something. I don't want to be too mean, but I mean, who cares that Mrs. Doubtfire like made a ton of money? I do think it's a great performance, but it's not a great movie. I mean, who cares that it made a ton of money? It isn't as good a movie as The Best of Times. So that's kind of where I would go with that. Anyways, this was we doing a little episode on Robin Williams to try to get back in the swing of things. Maybe I'll have seen some more stuff over the next few weeks that'll give me some reason to make another episode, and we'll see how it goes. Anyways, take care.